time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Okay, so there we go. There's that introduction. It gives me an opportunity here when we do the live lines to explain what's behind that. That's John Schaefer. He's the voice of Channel 5 Sports in Des Moines, Iowa. A great announcer. His dad is actually should be in the Announcers Hall of Fame. I mean, he's a legend in the Midwest as far as broadcasting is concerned. And then that guitar lick that you hear, that's the beginning of a song, Rose on the Fire, by our friend Bob Pace. And you'll hear his music a lot on the podcast to get us started here today. I want to thank everybody that's coming on, everybody that's going to participate in this podcast by George Live Line. It's on the topic that everybody's talking about or should be talking about, which is COVID-19. It is surging again. We're coming around to the fall and winter months when it's expected to get bad, get worse. We always thought that it would, I think. And of course, we haven't done a very good job to date. So we're kind of in the hole to start with here. And we want to bring our guest on in to discuss all of that, answer your questions, and more. Our guest is Dr. Andrew Nish. He spent almost 3 decades as an interventional radiologist. His passion is to educate the public and healthcare workers about true health and well-being and how this can be achieved through lifestyle changes, including food and nutrition, stress management, sleep, exercise, purpose in life, and social relationships. He's especially fascinated with what he describes as the mind-body connection and how our thoughts and beliefs directly influence our physical and mental health. And of course, he's also a big promoter of folks masking up and going to get vaccinated. We're going to talk about all that today. Let's bring him on in and welcome the good doctor. Time for another house call. Doc, welcome to a podcast by George.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on in here. And when I introduce you like this and I describe it as a house call, I always think, God, we're getting a doctor on here. We're getting him for free, folks. I got to tell you something. If you're a regular viewer of this podcast, healthcare is not cheap, and getting a doctor to talk to us, I mean, you just can't value how important this is. I'm just tickled to death to have you on the podcast. And this gives us an opportunity via the chat. I want to encourage everybody to do that, to come in and ask some questions of the doctor. I got a bunch of them, but Doc, let's turn the tables here a little bit to get started. We usually end with your kind of overview or your closing comments. How would you like to start? What's top of mind with you right now? I described what I'm seeing around the landscape, but that may not be exactly the way that you're looking at it. How do you feel about COVID and the pandemic in the heartland right now?
Well, let's back up just a little bit. You had this introduction of me, doing integrative therapy and nutrition and mind body, and particularly mind body. And, as I analyze my reaction to what's going on in the world, particularly the United States, and lack of vaccination and lack of belief in science, I used to get kind of frustrated and somewhat angry about it. But I've shifted my whole mindset on that, George. And this is the beauty of practicing mind-body therapies, whether it's meditation or yoga or whatever contemplative exercise you want to practice. And as I analyze my reaction and as I analyze my anger, I'm like, okay, that's not doing me any good. That's not doing the world any good. So I just realized that, my role in this is not to talk people into a vaccine or talk people into a mask. It's really to present the objective data on what we know today about COVID-19 and particularly the Delta variant. So I've kind of put judgment on many of my thoughts and feelings, and I'm really have come to the conclusion, just like in meditation, we have thoughts and we have interactions in our mind, and we judge those. And really the point of meditation or a mindfulness practice is to be non-judgmental. And so I've come to analyze my own reaction, and I'm trying to really say to the public, this is a non-judgmental presentation of what we know the facts to be in August of 2021. So it's been a big shift for me. I really got frustrated a few weeks ago, particularly in our healthcare environment. Our healthcare workers are on the brink of collapse. I was on a meeting a week and a half ago, and it's really a critical situation. We have a high census at the hospital, not necessarily all COVID, um, but it's taken a toll on healthcare workers. And I don't know how much longer people can keep this up day after day after day. And and I got very frustrated and very angry at the general public of not believing science. And I'm like, that's not doing me any good. That's not doing our public any good. I'm just here to present what I believe are facts based on the best science we have today.
Well, let's talk about these healthcare facilities, the hospitals. They're kind of
Mhm.
getting a double whammy, as I understand it. They already had high occupancy because of this other thing that's moving around, and then you've got this surging COVID on top of it. Are we reaching capacity or in the hospitals?
Yeah, oh yeah. We've been at capacity for several weeks now.
Yeah.
We've had to delay elective surgeries again
Mhm.
because of the circulation of the virus. We have now limited visitors again. This is true of all hospitals in Des Moines, Iowa. This isn't just Methodist or Lutheran. This is all hospitals. And it's a critical situation. We have had to, the problem has been we have beds, we don't have staff to staff the beds a lot of times. And, you have to remember that, the healthcare workers only have so much, they can only work so many hours. And, we're working a lot of hours. We're seeing, I think there's a level of frustration with the general public. Why aren't you getting vaccinated? Because if you are, then you're not going to end up here in the hospital. And it's just going on and on. And I think where's the end in this? We're now going to enter, our fall and winter season. So we're going to, potentially have influenza, although last year we had a very, very mild influenza year. And I think a lot of that had to do with, practices of mask wearing and hygiene, hand hygiene, and things like that. So the question is, are we going to have that surge? Well, we don't know. We should still get vaccinated for the flu. We should get our COVID vaccines. But there's just a general frustration on a lot of healthcare workers of why people aren't getting vaccinated, because most of the deaths we're seeing in hospital are preventable deaths from COVID.
Well, it's frustration, and it's even worse than that. In a lot of instances, I've seen some of the news coverage, not around here probably, but in some of the major metropolitan areas, these people are being insulted, they're being yelled at, they're being attacked when they drive to work. I mean, it's insanity in other parts of the country. Maybe not so bad here, but I'm actually glad that you mentioned the part about the flu shots, because we're getting questions already, and one of them is a segue, really, and the question is, how much time would you recommend separating your COVID shot, maybe the COVID booster? I think we're coming up on that too. A lot of people are wondering, is it time to get one of those? But a flu shot that you need to get normally. And then also for people in my age demographic, I think the shingles vaccine. Do you have to separate those? Does there need to be like a chart to maintain here with your vaccinations?
So the short answer is no, you do not need to separate COVID vaccine from the flu vaccine. You can get them the same day if you want to. That's that's guidance from the CDC. I don't know if I've seen the shingles vaccine addressed, but I think that it would follow the same pattern that, you don't need to get separated. Now, you do have to wait to get vaccine if you've had monoclonal antibodies. So if you've had a monoclonal antibody injection, you have to wait 90 days. But if you're just getting a COVID vaccine, you can get the COVID and flu vaccine at the same time.
Okay. Which leads me to my next question when it comes to the boosters now. People are becoming eligible for those, people that have severe immune deficiency, maybe people that you would be treating at your hospital that are undergoing cancer treatments and that type of thing. They're becoming eligible for these boosters. Well, if you had
let's stop there, George.
Okay, all right.
We should not consider those who are immunocompromised. We shouldn't really be calling it a booster. We should be calling it an additional dose, because they probably never got a reasonable antibody response in the first place. So we have to separate that. So right now, there are people eligible for an additional dose, okay? And those are people who are immunocompromised. solid organ transplants, people on chemotherapy, particularly with hematologic malignancies like leukemia and lymphoma and things, and then also who are taking immunosuppressants for like autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease and things like that. So those people should receive an additional dose. And the reason I think that this is critical is a booster implies that you had an immunologic reaction, and over time that immune response has waned. An additional dose means, in fact, you did really initially have a good immunologic response, and we're going to improve that. So there's a subtle difference there, but I think it's important to make that distinction.
It also maybe answers the next question that I had, which is if you had a 2-shot regimen for your initial immunization, do you need a 2-shot extra dose or 2-shot booster, as I call it? No.
So we don't know. So it happens today that the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, the ACIP, part of the CDC, is meeting today, and they're going to come out with a recommendation of when and how you should get booster doses. Okay, so that decision has not been made at the level of the CDC. They're meeting today. And what we anticipate is, and there's been some studies that have shown that after about 5 or 6 months, immunity begins to wane a bit, particularly in older people. And so the answer that I can say right now, without having the ACIP recommendation, is a booster dose for those who had an immune response will probably be only a single injection. It's not going to be another 2 injection. It's basically designed to crank up your immunity again to a point where you can fight off the Delta variant and any other variants that come to fruition.
We got another question coming in here that I want to get to straight away because I'm actually tickled to get one from this guy. It's Dr. Glenn Hurst. I don't know if you saw him on the podcast recently or not, folks, but he's running for the U.S. Senate. He's wanting that Democratic nomination. He's running against several Democrats right now to face off against Chuck Grassley. And he's my kind of guy. He's a progressive. He's out there on the left side of things, but he's also a medical doctor, and he's asking this question, which he may know the answer to, or he's just wanting to make the statement here so folks are aware of this. It says, hospitals in the Council Bluffs, Omaha area came together to require employees to get vaccinated. He says, with the healthcare worker shortage, this may drive unvaccinated employees to nursing homes and home care, caring for high-risk populations. The question is, wouldn't it be valuable to have a statewide requirement for all healthcare workers to be immunized? What's your response to that, Doc?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You know, how many healthcare workers in the acute care setting are we going to lose because they refuse to get vaccinated? And my opinion is very similar to Dr. Hurst, that all healthcare workers should be vaccinated. You know, we've been entrusted by the public to care for them. And, you know, the overriding oath that we all take in healthcare is first, do no harm. So vaccination goes a long way towards that. So I agree. I mean, I think all healthcare workers, whatever level you're at, whether you're in a nursing home, whether you're in an acute care hospital setting or a clinic, we should be vaccinated, unless there is a medical reason why you cannot receive a vaccine. And that's going to be very rare.
Well, thanks to Dr. Hurst for that question. Again, he's very busy. I mean, he's out there running a medical practice and trying to campaign and do everything that's associated with that. And I'd encourage everybody to revisit that podcast that I did with him, because he's an interesting candidate. Being a medical doctor in the midst of a pandemic, you might want a candidate like that. And of course, he's a big Medicare for All advocate, which also dovetails in this. And again, that's something that we all might want or need to get us through that. But again, thanks to Dr. Hurst. Well, my question also, the conversation when you talk to people about immunizations, always they talk about their reaction to the shot that they got. Some people surprisingly severe. My wife didn't feel well for like 4 days. I got it and literally couldn't even tell that I got it. I think I went out and mowed the yard. I mean, I just couldn't tell that I'd had a vaccine at all. But the question is now, if you get this additional shot, if you get this booster, and again, I apologize if I'm confusing things by using this terminology, is there any reason to believe that you will have a similar reaction to what you had the first time around, or is that just guesswork?
So there is some data on that, and the most recent data would suggest that there are no differences in the severity of those reactions. So you're not getting, more prolonged reactions, but a larger percent of the population is actually getting a reaction. So the reactions are exactly the same, but after the third dose, you're probably a little more likely to have a reaction, whether it be chills, a fever, body aches, whatever it is. But they're no more severe than after the second dose of the 2-dose Moderna and Pfizer vaccines.
And that's the next question. Yeah, I'm a Moderna man. That's what I tell people. It kind of makes me laugh because I'm old enough to remember the Marlboro men of yesteryear, most of which died
Yeah,
of
they're all
smoking
dead, George.
cigarettes, for God's sake. Yeah, but I'm a Moderna man. So, okay, that's what my initial vaccination was, Doc. Do I need to get a Moderna update, a Moderna booster?
As of right now, yes, you should stick with the same vaccine that you got initially. And that's, if the ACIP comes out with a recommendation, I'm sure that that's what the recommendation is going to be.
And here comes a question. Are we going to have to do this every year?
Don't know.
Yeah, it's just unknown.
We don't know.
Now we do with the flu, but is there a history of other vaccines that started out where we didn't know and then we determined after we'd gotten them, or maybe after one round of booster or updates on the vaccine, that it was no longer necessary? Is there a precedent for that?
That's a question I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You have to remember the flu mutates much more rapidly than the coronavirus and the COVID. So we don't know the answer to whether we're going to have to get a yearly or a bi-yearly vaccine, whether it might be incorporated as part of the flu vaccine. Those are all unknowns that we'll learn over time.
They're unknowns. It's kind of like rolling the dice on some of these things. I mean, it has to do with the question that I had actually. So if I get a booster, I'm going to be available here because of my advanced age. I think maybe next month or the month after that to get another one. And this Delta variant that's out there, as an example, is more transmissible. It's more virulent. It makes people sicker, perhaps. Is there a reason to believe that I'll be more resistant to illness even against Delta, because I had 3 or 4 doses of well, I guess it would be 3. I had 2 to start with. I had 2 shots, so I'm going to get 1 shot of Moderna, right? So
most likely.
Yeah, most likely. And will I be better protected at that point than I was after 2 shots?
Yes, you'll have a more robust antibody response. So what people will say, well, I've already had COVID, I don't need a vaccine.
Yeah.
And that just isn't true. What we know based on, responses and based on epidemiologic data is that, yes, you do mount, an antibody response after having COVID, but the breadth of that antibody response, meaning your ability to fight off variants, is not as great as if you have the vaccine. So vaccinated people have a broader breadth of response to potential variants in the future. So I would recommend, and that's being shown out in epidemiologic data. Our epidemiologic data are saying that, if you've had COVID and you've not been vaccinated, your chance of getting COVID again is probably 2 to 2.5 times that if you got vaccinated. So your natural antibody response, your natural immunity to COVID and COVID variants. So we have the initial alpha strain, and now we have these variants. Vaccination protects better.
I can sit around and confuse myself pretty easily. I mean, that's kind of my nature. So now correct me on this. So I'm thinking that maybe we're going to come to the understanding, maybe this isn't true, that we're all eligible to carry that virus load. We can all get it by breathing it, basically, have it in our nasal, I don't know what you call it, pharynxes or whatever you call it, nasal passages. I've heard you describe it before.
Nasal pharynx.
Yeah, pharynx. I mean, we can all have it there. But what the vaccine does is prevent you from getting sick from it and dying from it, obviously. And that really the only way to prevent getting that in your pharynx is to wear a mask. People kind of think the vaccine is more important. It is for this illness thing, but as far as actually, you see what I mean? To screen yourself, the mask is more important.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So when you get a vaccination, you get these IgG antibodies. So it's an immunoglobulin G antibody. It circulates in your bloodstream, and when you get COVID, it goes and attacks the COVID. There's also antibodies called IgA antibodies, and that is not as big a stimulus. And so these antibodies don't necessarily reside in our nasopharynx. So people who have had vaccination can get infected with COVID, SARS-CoV-2 virus. It can live in their nasopharynx, and you can transmit it. We know that vaccinated people will transmit the virus if they're infected. Now, they may not become symptomatic, right? That's the whole idea behind the vaccine, that we have this immune response that's immediately available to combat the symptomatic portion of the disease. So what we think and what we're learning is that if you get the Delta variant and you've been vaccinated, yes, you can have a viral load in your nasopharynx. You can transmit that viral load to other people, but it may last significantly less time than if you weren't vaccinated. So for example, and we don't know the exact timing on this, but if you were vaccinated, you may be infectious for 3 to 5 days, whereas opposed if you're not vaccinated, you may be infectious for 8 to 10 days. So we have to take that into consideration. What we're also learning is, do you shed as much virus? And that's kind of debatable right now. I think you shed virus significantly less time. Whether you shed less or more virus if you're vaccinated, we're not certain on. So that's a little bit of an uncertainty. So the answer is, if you want to protect yourself from getting the Delta variant and you want to protect others because you may be shedding the virus and be asymptomatic, a mask is the best way to do that.
Well, and if you want to be kind of this superhero kind of thing, the transmission of the virus is what keeps it alive, gives it the opportunity to mutate and become worse than it already is. So if you wear a mask, you're helping in a very small way to prevent that from happening, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Yes.
great. I mean, you can.
Yeah, the more the virus transmits, the more chance it has to mutate into a new strain that has some survival advantage. So you have to remember, a virus does two things in life: it infects and it replicates. That's it. And it's mutating all the time. So there's literally millions. I was listening to a podcast yesterday of a sequencing lab. There's literally millions of mutations to this virus. Only a very, very few are actually going to be transmitted and survive. So every time the virus replicates, there's a chance for that replication process to have a mistake in it. That happens in our cells all the time, but we have these great repair mechanisms to repair those mistakes. And so, that's how variants emerge. There's some survival advantage to that variant, so now it becomes the dominant strain. So for Delta, it's more transmissible. Okay, so remember when we started out with COVID, we had this value of R0 or R0. And what that means is, if I am transmitting the virus, how many people do I transmit that to? So the initial R0 or R0 for COVID, it was around 2.5. The R0 for the Delta variant, so how many people will I infect if I'm transmitting the virus, goes from 2.5 to, we think, around 6. So it's at least twice as transmissible than the original virus. Even more reason that a mask is highly effective.
And I heard somebody say the other day, well, the Epsilon virus is on the way, that, after Delta, they're just going through the letters of the alphabet. I think that was just silliness. I don't think there's a pre-naming of the next mutation that's coming along, the next variant. But as it stands right now, Delta's moving around out there. It's got plenty of room to move and thrive and survive. And so there isn't any new mutation on the horizon yet. Is there, or is there?
Oh, there's new mutations all the time. Whether they become clinically significant, only time will tell. I mean, we had this thing about the Lambda variant, right? Well, the Lambda variant's kind of died out and we don't hear much about it. So, this is an interesting point of this whole mind-body thing that I'm so big on.
Yeah.
Is that our minds are now moving on to the next variant that's going to kill us all. Well, As I've said before, George, what's the only certainty in life? Well, that's uncertainty. So we have to be willing to live with uncertainty. So what we're doing now is we're predicting that, oh, there's going to be this next killer variant. So we're already imagining a future that hasn't happened, and it's causing us stress and anxiety. And we just can't do that. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the next variant. We don't know what's going to happen with the flu season, let's say. I mean, we're already catastrophizing, oh, we're going to have this twindemic, people are calling it. Well, we
Yeah.
don't know that.
Mhm.
We don't know that. And we live in this unpredictable future that really causes many, many people in our society this anxiety. And anxiety leads to fear, which leads to stress, which leads to our stress response, which leads to, guess what? Suppression of our immune system, exactly what we don't want. So I just encourage people to live in the present, live with what we know, do the best you can based on the current science that's being presented, and enjoy life a little bit. You know, when I look at the newspaper, which I don't look at all that often, all I see are stories of, oh, I had to cancel my trip. Oh, it's too bad. And it's sort of like, you know, life is bigger than our next vacation. Life is what you make it. Life is here in front of you. Notice all the things that are good about life.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really a mindset of how do we get through this pandemic? And if we're constantly worrying about the next variant, or we're worrying about what's going to happen with everyone on Earth, that can be overwhelming and really make us anxious, nervous, and we live in this state of constant fear. And when you do that, you're not doing your immune system any favors.
And I can identify exactly what you're talking about. I can't go on a cruise. Well, I grew up a barefoot farm boy on a dirt road. I mean, and we were dirt poor folks. I mean, we didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. I mean, once a summer, we might go on an excursion to Riverview Amusement Park. I mean, that was about it when I was a kid. And when it rained and in the wintertime, sometimes you didn't get off the farm for weeks. I mean, if the weather was inclement, I mean, it's just, we can do this. I mean, you just have to change your outlook and perspective on things. And speaking of that, I wanted to. This is a good question. Somebody, they're talking all about the vaccines and masks, and this questioner says the masks, of course, are hugely important. But what about social distancing and hand washing? We don't hear much about those types of things anymore.
Yeah, so we realize that, you know, hand washing is important to a very limited extent with this. This is a respiratory propagated virus.
Mm,
Hand washing is important if you've been around people who may have had COVID and you begin to touch your mouth or your mucous membranes. It's important to wash your hands so you're not transmitting the virus. But that's a minor component of keeping the transmission train alive. Social distancing, you know, that's really interesting. You don't hear much about it. And I think we've learned that, you know, if you're in an enclosed space, this virus is aerosolized. And so it's circulating with the air circulation in the space. So if you're in a restaurant and the tables are 6 feet apart, is that really decreasing your risk of COVID? And I'm not sure we really know the answer to that. I don't think so, honestly. I think that this is aerosolized into very small particles that continually circulate throughout closed spaces. That's why it's important to wear masks.
well, show you how dumb I am. Maybe we can personalize this even more. I've been playing hockey this summer. During the low points of the virus, and now we're escalating. So I got a feeling that that's going to end very soon for me, and they're probably going to close the buildings in this fall and winter if this goes the way that it's trending right now. But I look at it and think, well, if I get in there early in the morning, I mean, sometimes the science is available 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, if there was virus in the locker rooms or in the in the rink or something like that, it's no longer airborne. It's hit the floor or something like that. Is that silliness, or is there
No,
a
there's
time frame to that?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's some truth to that. I don't think we know, at least I don't know the exact time frame for that. I'm
Okay.
sure there's been studies of, you know, how quickly in a closed environment do these things drop to the floor. I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Well, it's just my unique perspective, and Maybe as we start to wrap up here, I get some more questions I'd like to get to here if we can from our viewers. But uh, one question that I had, or observation anyway, I mean, I wanted to get your take on this. Again, it might make you a little irritated, but I see people all the time that haven't gotten vaccinated. They're waiting for FDA approval.
Mhm.
And these are people that I know heretofore. I don't know where they're getting their information, but they didn't know what the FDA was, didn't know what it's responsible. As an example, folks, if you drink, that alcohol that you're consuming, the FDA doesn't approve that. If you're putting cosmetics on your face, which are a screen to the inside of your body, your inner soul, basically, that stuff isn't FDA approved. And then, Doc, I got to tell you, I know some people that have availed themselves of what you would call maybe street drugs, maybe like marijuana and that type of that. Yeah, it's not FDA approved. So I guess my observation would be, my God, if you will do any or all of those things which aren't FDA approved, why would you not get a vaccine in a pandemic? But how do you feel about that FDA thing and that issue surrounding that?
So, I mean, I understand early in this that the vaccine was given emergency use authorization. People were a little hesitant, but that argument no longer holds any water. The Pfizer vaccine has been fully approved, just like a measles vaccine, a polio vaccine, a flu vaccine. It's been fully approved. It's a fully approved biologic agent.
Mm.
So it is approved. Um, the really interesting thing is all these other treatments that we have, monoclonal antibodies, remdesivir, all these other things that we're treating people for in the hospital, none of these are FDA approved. They all
Oh,
had emergency use authorization.
mm.
So that argument to me holds no water. I think it's an excuse that people were using. I hope they now realize that these vaccines are incredibly safe. So when you look at so we have this VAERS database, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. And so anybody can report anything on the front end of that database. So if you broke your toe, you could say, oh, I broke my toe because of the vaccine, and you can report that.
Yeah.
So the thing that gets publicized is people are reporting adverse events, and those adverse events are getting publicized before we've actually investigated them. So it's really the most important things for the VAERS database is looking at the back end after those claims have been investigated. And that takes a lot of time. What we know right now is these vaccines are incredibly safe. Okay, we've administered hundreds of millions of doses of all of these vaccines. The Pfizer the most, Moderna second, Johnson & Johnson third. And what we found is, we hear, oh, there's cardiac inflammation called myocarditis or pericarditis, which is inflammation of the sac around the heart. Well, that occurs in about 4 cases out of a million. We've heard about Guillain-Barré with the Johnson & Johnson Johnson vaccine and
Yeah.
AstraZeneca. That occurs about 3 out of a million. We've
Wow.
heard about the thrombocytopenic blood clots, right? Well, that occurs 2.5 out of a million. So we are talking very, very tiny numbers here. And when you look at the risk of death by not getting vaccinated versus the risk of death by getting vaccinated, it's orders of magnitude different in favor of the vaccine. So we have to look at, all of this has to be put in the appropriate context. And that's what doesn't happen. We throw things out in the news, but we don't know the context of that number or that statement or anything else.
Okay, so let's talk context here, and I think I'm starting to pick up what you're putting down here finally with the mind body connection. And I read this bio that starts off when you're talking about well-being and how it can be achieved through lifestyle changes, including food and nutrition, stress management, sleep, exercise, purpose in life, and social relationships. I mean, that's a great summation. But when it comes to this pandemic, people are talking vaccines, they're talking masks, social distancing, hand washing, and all of the acrimony associated with all of that that's on the talking head news sources that we all watch. But the one thing that people aren't talking about very much, Doc, the one thing that you can do, and if you're in addition to becoming vaccinated and doing those things, is doing things to improve your overall health, because the people that are most at risk from breakthrough and from, getting it really sick with Delta as an example, and perish the thought, my God, dying, are people that are in not very good physical and mental health to start with. Am I correct in that?
So when you look at, let's look at breakthrough infections with people who've been vaccinated. Those that are ending up in the hospital, or even a few are dying, tend to have multiple other what we call comorbidities, diseases, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, whatever it might be, and they tend to be older. In the unvaccinated population, those people who are getting severely ill and dying happen to be younger. 20-year-olds are dying from COVID. So, this is a really interesting point, and one I think I've made before, is the vaccine sort of typifies our approach to healthcare in this country. And healthcare in our country means, to most people, if I get sick, the doctor or the healthcare system will take care of me. There's a pill for that. Well, there isn't a pill for everything. Most of the pills that we give people aren't changing the course of the disease. They're managing symptoms. And it's the same way with the vaccine. The vaccine is a wonderful tool for this acute reaction to an infectious disease. But as has been so dramatically pointed out in this country, we are a very sick country. That's why we have this incredible death rate, particularly for an advanced society. And it's because we are not healthy. And let's just take diabetes. Now, there was just the latest statistic on diabetes is that 14.3% of people in this country have diabetes, and another 100 million, so another third of the country, has prediabetes. And those are enormous statistics that show how metabolically dysregulated we are. And all of these people who have dysregulated metabolism are at risk for dementia, cardiovascular disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, fatty liver disease, all these things. So if we really want to combat the next infectious disease, the next pandemic, which will happen 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, I don't know, then we have to become a healthier society. When you're healthier, when you're not metabolically dysregulated, you don't die from these infections. So I just think this highlights how, as a society, we are ill. And it also highlights the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Because who's sicker?
Sure.
Who's dying more? It's our African American brothers and sisters. It's our Latinx brothers and sisters, because they don't have the advantages you and I do. And it's just, when we look at it from a societal perspective, this has just highlighted the discrimination and large socioeconomic discrepancies we have in this country.
That's an excellent point. I make it all the time, and people oftentimes think of it in terms of possessions. I mean, the type of house that you have, the car that you drive, the vacations you take. Yeah, it's an issue there. But when we're talking about living or dying, that's a completely different parameter and something that has to be dealt with. Well, I started off by.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead,
quick?
please.
I'm reading a book right now that is, it's really kind of an interview with a Native American elder. And this concept of possession of land or material is completely foreign to Native Americans. Completely foreign. They're like, what do you mean own something? The land is for everyone. The air is for everyone. The water is for everyone. And they don't have this concept of ownership in the Native American culture. And, we have to go back and think about that. That, what we were put on this earth, and we are really put on this earth to enjoy the earth, but preserve the earth. So why is it our right as a human to possess more and more and more? We need to, and this is about community. This is about socialization, which you talk about in my little bio. This is about community, and community means helping one another for the betterment of everyone, not just yourself. And I resonate with this Native American elder who's talking about the earth is for all of us and not just the few of us. And we've lost sight of that because it's all about how much can I have? How much can I garner? How much wealth can I accumulate? How many things can I put in my house? Well, let's think about the fundamental of life. Is it really about things, or is it about the enjoyment of what's given to us and is right in front of us? You know, I had one of my colleagues, a physician colleague who I know pretty well, and I also know one of her patients. And her patient asked her, "What do you do for fun?" And you know what her answer was? "I don't have fun. I have too much paperwork to do."
Oh, God.
And I'm just like, wow, this is a real testament to what's going on right now. And this is the whole thing about we're not at ease with our current situation. And when we're not at ease, that breeds what I call dis-ease, DIS-EASE. If we're not at ease, then we're at dis-ease with our current situation. And when we are at dis-ease with our current situation for so long, we develop the physical disease. And I just think it's so important for people to recognize that for most of us, and not all of us, I recognize there are people every day who are, at threat for dying because of their social situation. But for most of us, everything you need is right in front of you. Go outside and just enjoy the beautiful sky, enjoy a sunset, enjoy nature, enjoy the plants. Really enjoy your kids. And so, yeah, we get frustrated with our kids, but kids, I went to a blues concert the other night, or a bluegrass concert, and I sat there and I was listening to the music, but I watched this little 3 or 4-year-old. It was raining, and he had on these big rubber boots and an umbrella, and he had the best time just stomping around in the mud. And it was just a joy to watch. This is unbridled joy in this small child who, in the most simplistic terms, was having a great time in the mud.
Yeah.
And that brought me joy just thinking about, wow, how carefree, how enjoyable. And I'm not saying that, as adults, we all have responsibilities. We have responsibilities to our family and ourselves, but we can also enjoy what's right in front of us. And we miss that opportunity. And that's about present moment living. That's about mindfulness, non-judgmental ability to enjoy what's right in front of you.
That's great. That's good medicine, folks. I mean, that's philosophical, but it is intertwined. It is this mind-body
It's,
connection
you know
thing
what?
that,
It's
yeah,
science-based too. It
yeah.
is philosophical, and it goes back to the ancient traditions. But as we are learning more and more, and we're studying this, I can tell you there are hundreds of articles that will confirm everything we're saying.
And I don't know, it comes back to music. It's funny because these podcasts that we do always reminds me, when you talk about the land and the ownership of it, it reminds me of Woody Guthrie. This land is my land, this land is your land. And of course, that song that I saw you end the presentation with, the first time I ever saw Dr. Nish, Jesse Cullen Young and the Youngbloods and Get Together. I mean, it all comes back to that. Well, let's wrap it up here, Doc. I started off by talking about the fact that this is kind of a house call. We get to visit with the doctor. And when you go see the doctor, and Dr. Nish would be a good example, very patient, listens to all your questions, gives the answers the best that he can. If he doesn't know the answer to something, he'll tell you that. But then before you leave the office, he always gives you a summation or a wrap up or a diagnosis or some suggestion to go home with. So, Doc, what's your word for the day?
My word for the day is impermanence. So we have this idea, everything in life is impermanent, right?
Yeah.
Nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
So we go to the next moment. Our current thought is impermanent. COVID, in the situation we're at, is impermanent. We will get through this. I don't know what the other end's going to look like, but I want people to remember this is not permanent. Everything in life is impermanent. Your vacation is impermanent. Your current situation may be impermanent. Your current thought is impermanent. So that's sort of my word for the day. And then when you look at life and you look at, we think about things that made us really happy and joyful. That was not permanent, yet we can remember those things and we can bring those visions back to make us feel good. So life is impermanent. Every experience in life is impermanent, and COVID is impermanent. We'll get through this one way or another, good, bad, and different. And also remember that none of us can predict the future. Okay. This only certainty in life, again, is uncertainty. And we just have to be comfortable with uncertainty.
That's great. These are uncertain times. There are dark clouds ahead, folks. Like I mentioned, I don't know. I don't want to be a naysayer.
Now, George, maybe you
Yeah.
don't know there's dark clouds ahead.
Yeah, I got you.
We said the same thing last year about the flu. Oh my gosh, the flu season.
Well,
It was
true.
non-existent.
Yeah.
It was non-existent. So don't go there.
All right.
Don't go there.
All right. I'm taking the diagnosis. I'm taking the advice from the doctor here. That's
Because
great.
our minds, it's a survival mechanism, okay? We are evolutionarily programmed to have those kinds of thoughts because it was a survival mechanism. But that doesn't really work in today's society because we have such advanced techniques to, stay alive that those things don't work for us. In fact, they're counterproductive. As we worry about the future, we now become this fearful creature with this dysregulated, dysfunctional fight or flight system, sympathetic system, which impacts our immunity. So live day to day, live your best life, and just try and enjoy these little things. I enjoy this. This brings me joy because I get to talk to you, and and it's not self-promoting. I'm not a self-promoter, but I do like to speak with people because I've learned, we were talking before, Leonard Pitts wrote an article in the newspaper this morning, and it was about the wisdom of experience. And there's something to be said for experience. And his point was, we have to look at the wisdom of experience with this COVID virus. And the wisdom of experience is the people who are dying have not been vaccinated. And we need to listen to those people because they are pleading for people to get the vaccine because they didn't. So listen to the wisdom of experience. And that's the same with the book I'm reading on the Native American. He's giving me the wisdom of experience and the wisdom of his tradition.
Well, that's great. And that's a great stopping point. I want to thank everybody for all of the great questions that we got. Every question is important when it comes to Podcast by George, with a special shout out to Dr. Hurst that took the time from his busy day in campaigning to pose that excellent question as well. And folks, I hope you enjoy Podcast by George and the Podcast by George live line so that we can have folks like the good doc on live and take your questions in real live time. Dr. Nish, thanks again for coming on Podcast by George.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Have a great day.
That's great. Folks, that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Podcast by George. And just some housekeeping here. Some people going to YouTube have a difficult time in finding Podcast by George because the name's relatively generic, believe it or not. Podcast by George. A lot of search results will come up in YouTube if you look for that. Put it in quote marks, Podcast by George. It'll pop right up for you. Or what I recommend is go to podcastbygeorge.com, and all of the platforms, the major ones that Podcast by George is on, they're there. Little icons. Just click on one. It'll take you right to that platform, and then you can subscribe, and you'll always be notified then when a new edition, a new show comes online. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Podcast by George and our live line with Dr. Nish. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another Podcast by George.